Hello, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation today, you can type them into the Q&A located on the bottom toolbar of your Zoom screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentations. This webinar is being recorded, and those registered for Crop Talk will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 4th edition of Crop Talk. And this week, as we're all kind of cleaning up on the seeding and getting most of the seeding finished up here, I thought it'd be a good idea to maybe get Kim on and talk about gearing up for the spraying season and to talk about a few things that are should be on top of our mind when we're out there spraying. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity for Kim to weigh in on that today. After that, our crop scout, going to be a bit of a crop update, and then we'll head into the crop scouting panel. So what I'll do right now is let Kim take over the screen, and she'll give us some advice on spraying for this season and what to be watching for.
Okay, I'm just going to get my screen up. Let me know when you guys can see that.
Looks good.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm just going to get a better pointer on there. Okay, so thanks very much, Lionel, for having me on. And I just have a few slides here just to talk about some pretty general things. And if we've got any questions, we can answer some specifics at the end. But we are, getting ready for spraying, and some areas of the province have done quite a bit of spraying already. We had a kind of a good run on seeding early on, and then we were some areas were, held up for a little while with some extra moisture and stuff. And now, but, we've got, so we kind of have two different stages of spraying going on. I know there's an awful lot of canola that hasn't been sprayed yet, especially as we get towards, that western side of the province type thing. So we're going to have a couple of phases, I think, in the spray season here. So, but I do know that we've definitely had some in-crop sprays going on here in the central region for some of those earlier sprayed or earlier seeded crops. And I think things have been going pretty well so far. So we were going to talk about water volumes, application timing, some hard to kill weeds, spraying under stressful conditions, and smoke. And Lionel, if I've missed anything or you have anything, just jump in and ask me. Like I said, this is pretty informal this morning. Talking about water volumes, anybody who's heard me, I am a broken record. You always, always, always use lots of water. Use as much, the maximum recommended water volume as you can. When you look at our crop protection guide, those are available at all of our service centers and from us here in Carmen as well if you need them. But those product pages in there are a subset of the label. And so on, one of the sections we have in there is water volume. And so if there's a range in water volume, use the highest one possible. Water is the best thing you can put in a spray tank most of the time. Use the recommended adjuvants. So sometimes there are different adjuvants recommended for different uses. And so again, that's something to talk to your company reps about and make sure that you are using the appropriate adjuvant and making sure you use it. Sometimes the adjuvant is make or break whether that product's going to work well or not. And other times, depending on some conditions, we might back off, when we're talking about spraying under stressful conditions a bit later, sometimes we back off a bit on some adjuvants because they can be a little bit hot. But again, use the recommended adjuvants. Again, those are going to be on those product pages. That's also on the label. And make sure that you're doing everything you can to make that herbicide work as best it can. And the reason, that I'm always so concerned about water volumes is that coverage is absolutely crucial. And with contact herbicides, you have to cover the weeds. They do not move in the plant. This is something like Liberty. This is something like Pardner. A lot of the group 14s, those are really just contact herbicides. You have to cover the weeds. That herbicide does not move at all within the plant. So if you're getting, good coverage with decent sized droplets and you're getting enough on that leaf, you're going to have enough product there to kill that weed. If you've got, the wrong size, you just have to have appropriate coverage. And so again, that's another thing that's on the label, the recommended the recommended nozzle size and recommended for droplet size. The recommended nozzles, that is also on the product pages, that is in the labels. And so again, whatever that product is registered with, it was recommended. That is the best tool to be using with that product to get the best performance out of that product. With systemic herbicides, we still have to have at least some some droplets hit the plant. So you have to make sure that you've got decent coverage there too. It's not quite as crucial as with contact herbicides, but those droplets still have to hit the plants. And then they do get taken into the plant, and then they do travel throughout the xylem and the phloem within that plant, and they do travel around and they do kill the plant that way. So coverage isn't quite as crucial, but you still have to have at least some droplets hit. And so this is especially important. I'm talking different water volumes. Like when you've got really, really sparse weeds, when there's not a lot of them and they're really small, you've got to make sure you're hitting them. And then also too, when we have really, really dense weed patches, we have to get the coverage on those because those are harder to kill when we've got some big mats of weeds. And I'll show you some pictures in a minute of some things that I've been getting in from some of the agronomists around the province. And again, you need the appropriate droplet size for coverage, drift reduction, and also to reduce the losses to evaporation. So we know that larger droplets are going to be better for drift reduction and reducing losses for evaporation, but they can't be so large that they're going to roll off the plant type thing. But so again, watch your labels, read the product pages, watch your labels, and use the most appropriate nozzle to get you that droplet size. And again, if you're switching nozzles or you're looking at, playing with different things, those TJET catalog or any of the spray catalogs that have, when you're changing pressures and changing speeds, and just find like there's, more than one nozzle choice. There's lots of really great nozzles out there, and just make sure you've got one that's getting you, at the pressure range that you're working at the speed you're going at, making sure you're getting the coverage you want and the appropriate droplet size. And those tables are really easy to use. So those are available online if you want, but also I just like to have the catalogs around to take a look. I want to still talking about contact herbicides. I'm talking about keep Liberty great because we don't want to say make Liberty great again. It's already a great product. We are heavily reliant on Liberty in Western Canada because of our canola acres. And this is a crop that the crop competition helps this product out greatly. We've got great success with Liberty. We know it's worked well for many, many, many years. And we rely heavily on that because the bulk of our acres in Western Canada, the bulk of our canola acres are Liberty tolerant, and we're using that product at least once in that system every single year that we have canola on the ground. I kind of have new in brackets there a use pattern with the Enlist system. So that Enlist systems have been out for a couple of years now between the corn and the soybean systems. Because of some regulations in the States right now, no dicamba can be sprayed in the US in 2025. So almost all of those acres, I think it's around 90 million plus acres of soybeans for sure, and some of the corn will get sprayed with glufosinate now. So you could still grow and extend bean. You're just not going to be able to spray the dicamba on it. So most of those acres are going to be an Enlist acre. I think as of last year, about 65% of those acres were already Enlist, and that is going to grow again and again because of the situation with dicamba. And the issue with this is that we're using a contact herbicide on row crops. There's lots of bare ground, and these crops are not competitive till much later in the season. Now, something like Roundup, there's also like an awful lot of Roundup resistant weeds or glyphosate resistant weeds out there. So some of those weeds, hopefully that Liberty is going to get, but there's no residual with this product at all. And we are we're asking this weed to use. We're using this product in much more challenging conditions than what we see in Western Canada when we're spraying canola. We need to be really good stewards of this product. Try not to break it. There is some Liberty resistance worldwide. It's not widespread. It's not a lot of different weed species, but it is there, and it will happen if we spray this product inappropriately and if we don't use it the best we can. So with Liberty, it's always lots of water, as much water as you can get on there. Spray it like a fungicide if you can. If you think it works great at 10 gallons, you should see it at 15. It looks really, really good. Lots and lots of water, and you get much better grass control too when you get better cover, when you've got lots of coverage, when you've got lots more water with that Liberty. You need to have good coverage. You need to spray small weeds. I know lots of guys, if you're just trying to spray once in that canola, you let those weeds get a little bit bigger because you're waiting for all of them to come up before you're spraying. You're far better off to spray a couple of times if you can. Spray when those weeds are small. It's a contact herbicide, and the smaller the weed, the better a job it's going to do. And I would always plan for multiple applications. If you can get away with just one and you don't need to do that second one, that would be great. That would save you some money, save another pass over the field, save us from putting more Liberty down again. But again, I think you need to plan for for that because we need to be going after those weeds when they're small. We need to be getting good coverage. And also too, when that canola starts getting bigger or any of those crops start getting bigger, and if they do start shading out, we're missing some weeds, they're going to come through. And so again, like I said, we in Western Canada, we're probably not changing our use pattern on Liberty that terribly much, although it will get used a lot more on soybeans and corn here too. But we need to make sure that we preserve this molecule because we are so heavily reliant on it in our canola crops. For application timing, small weeds. You're always better off to spray small weeds rather than larger weeds. They just have different, like less growing points on them if they're small weeds. Some weeds can advance through their stages very rapidly, so you need to be on the scouting. You need to be watching what's there. I'll show you some pictures in a minute of some of those things. Scout and decide which weeds are the driver weeds and stage those appropriately because you may have different stages of different weeds in that crop. And I've got a good picture to show you that in a minute too. Stay within the crop staging limits for maximum crop tolerance. But again, it's always a balance between the crop staging and the weed staging. And hopefully you should be able to get those sprays on before we've hit those maximum crop staging crop tolerance, but you do need to watch with some products. You need to watch that crop timing, and you need to pull back on some products after they hit a certain crop stage, and switch out to different products. So again, just be aware of that when know which products you're using and know what staging is the most appropriate for that product. And if the crop is getting beyond that, you will have to switch out to something different. If you're doing multiple sprays on something like corn and soybeans, they should be at least 10 days apart. Those crops are resistant to glyphosate and that type of thing, but they're not immune. So it is better just for less stress on the plant to have those applications at least 10 days apart, and that will work best for you. This is one thing, this lamb's quarters. This is one that just really goes through its growth stages really, really fast. I mean, and when we're looking at this one here, we've actually got the cotyledons. If you can see on my pointer here, the cotyledons are right under here. So this is the first set of leaves. We've got two. We're at 6 leaves. We're pushing out 8, and this plant could be only a couple of inches tall. So something to really watch is your lamb's quarters. It goes through its stages very quickly, and you can have like 6 to 8 leaf lamb's quarters. It's really tiny, and you don't notice it. And a lot of labels, by the time you hit an 8 leaf lamb's quarter, they're not going to do a good job anymore. So this is something to really watch. And we get calls every year about lamb's quarters being resistant, that chemical just didn't work on it anymore. And I think a lot of time we are beyond staging, or we are just at the very limit of staging with lamb's quarters, and it gets away on us because it just gets through, because this is a big plant. This is also a hard to wet weed because the leaf surface can be very waxy and we have these secretions on the leaf. It's a hard to wet weed, so it doesn't take in the product as nicely as some other crops or some other weeds do, sorry. So again, it's a more difficult one to get. You've really got to be at the appropriate staging with this one. Same as wild buckwheat. There's some buckwheat in here, and there's some really little ones down here. This is nice where you can see those cotyledons sometimes are at a 120-degree angle. We've got a really tiny one here, but wild buckwheat can get really big on you really fast, and it's a hard one to get. It needs to be as small as possible, and you can start putting on leaves, and it's just hard to get, especially with just glyphosate. So this is one to keep an eye on, and there's already some really big buckwheat plants out there that I've seen just on our own stuff at U of M Farm for our diagnostic school plots, but in fields as well. I've seen some really big wild buckwheat already. Round leaf mallow, there's an awful lot of it going on in this picture here, and it's really not that big yet, but this is another weed that, especially once we get some heat, it puts on leaves really, really quickly. These leaves are nice and flat, and they intercept the spray really nicely, but you can get some pretty big plants pretty quick with round leaf mallow, so really be watching that and be on that and spraying before that one gets too big, because you have to watch the leaf staging on this one as well. In this picture, I thought I'd show you there's an awful lot going on in here in this cereal crop. And, we've got a nice little lamb's quarters down here. That's only 4 leaf. It's pretty tiny. We've got everything from stinkweed over here. This stuff isn't flowering. This stuff is actually flowering. That is way beyond spraying. And then we've actually got some false ragweed here. These are really, really big plants. So most crops, we don't see false ragweed being a really bad weed. It's usually on the field edges or maybe old yards sites or maybe around some bush if there's still some bush on the property. And so I wouldn't be worried. I mean, this is a really big plant, so you're going to have trouble controlling things once they get much bigger than this. There's an awful lot of leaves on here, but I'd really be watching things like this, like your lamb's quarters here. These are going to start to advance. So decide which are your driver weeds and which are the ones that are all through the field, which are the ones that we have to get, which are the ones that we have to make sure that we're in the appropriate staging and make sure that we're staging there. This cereal crop, we're at whenever leaf staging, we're at like 1, 2, 3, pushing 4. We're probably, we're at a good 3-leaf stage on this. So there's still loads of time. I don't even see tillers really. Maybe tillers are just starting. And this one down here, we're just starting on tillering. So we've still got lots of time on this cereal crop. But again, it's just a matter of getting out there when you can and watching those weeds and making sure. I always do try to do a scrape back too with my trowel and pull back the top little bit of soil and just see what's coming. If you've got a whole bunch of canola, just a volunteer canola just about to break the surface, or if you see a whole bunch of little weeds, really that have germinated but haven't broke surface yet, then maybe it's usually a good idea to wait till those are up. But still take a good look at all the weeds that are out there and make sure you're getting these weeds. You don't want to be letting some of these, lamb's quarters get away on you. When you've got heavy weed growth, this is something that I really want to stress. You need to increase the water volume to the maximum recommended, increase the rates to the maximum recommended, use the appropriate adjuvants. And some labels are very specific, and I really like the On Deck label. That's a really nice new product from Corteva. And this is just cut and pasted right out of a guide. The standard rate is 325 mils per acre, but the high rate is 435 mils per acre. It's 1 application per year. It can be tank mixed with an MSO, that's a methylated seed oil, a crop oil concentrate, or high surfactant oil concentrate type adjuvants at minimum 0.5 liters per 100 liter spray solution. For enhanced weed control, when weed populations are high, weed staging is advanced, or when weeds are stressed due to environmental conditions. And so I think that that's really nice. We're starting to see a little bit more of this on some labels, and I'd love to see this going forward on lots of more labels. But we know when we're under challenging conditions, and I guess we're talking about that later too. Heavy weed growth is definitely challenging, and we just need to do everything we can. You have to get those weeds covered, and we know we don't get as good weed control when we're going into those big mats of weeds. But some of the products now do have it, and I would definitely follow the label. And I think they have for specific weeds as well when they're talking about different on the On Deck label. So if you look at those product pages in our guide, or you look at the label, they've got some really good information on which rates to use on which weeds, depending on basically how heavy the population is that you're trying to spray. And so just pictures like this. I think this is peas. Oh, yes, it is peas. There's some peas here. This is hopefully the whole field doesn't look like this. But, when you see weed growth like this is going to be really tough. And you're going to have to go after this when this stuff is really small. This is a very challenging condition. This is, a situation. If you knew, apparently this is a picture from just a really bad area of the field. The kochia in this field is very patchy, but this is an area that it's quite bad in. And, if you know going into this that there's certainly some of these crops just don't have a lot of good post-emergent options to deal with a weed like this. And so, so pre-emerge herbicides are vital in situations like this to take down some of these populations, because when you get to the post-emergent spraying, depending on the crop, you might not have any options left, or your options are limited or they're poor. And like I said, some cases there just are no options left. So this is, again, there is peas in here. There's a row right along here. But this is a really, really heavy weed infestation, and this is going to be very, very difficult. This is not going to look very nice. Here's another one. This is actually all lamb's quarters. It's all really little right now. It's pretty bad. This is just basically a carpet of lamb's quarters. And this is, you got to get on this before these get any bigger. The ground is pretty much covered now, really not seeing a lot of black dirt in there. And those will grow really fast. And so, there's a cereal crop in there. It's poking through. You need to get on this really quick before this stuff gets away on you, because those weeds are going to advance through their staging very fast. And most of those are in the 4-leaf stage already. So you don't have a lot of time left on these. So again, these are very challenging conditions, and you have to do your best to get these weeds out of there as soon as possible. So again, spraying under stressful conditions, use the maximum water volume, use the appropriate adjuvants. Sometimes if it's hot and dry, then we can kind of back off on some of the adjuvants because they can be a little harder on the crop. It's always going to be a balance between crop staging and weed staging, but you're always better to spray small weeds. You reduce the weed competition within the crop early, and you give that crop every chance it's got to be the most competitive crop it can be. In windy conditions, use the largest droplet size recommended to reduce drift, but still get good coverage. When you go to larger droplets, you can get less coverage, and you need to make sure that you're still getting that good coverage, but you need to be careful with drift, obviously. And in hot conditions, use the largest droplet size recommended to reduce evaporation, because we do know in hot conditions, and this is when you can watch those delta numbers, delta T numbers, and we know that you do get evaporation of those small droplets, and they just don't hit the targets, and they're just not useful for us. Under smoky conditions, it can long-term create cooler conditions. If we were smoky for weeks and weeks at a time, what that tends to do is to kind of depress the temperatures a little bit. If that lasts long enough, it can affect both weed and crop growth. So I guess we'll have to see where we're at. We're just beginning of June here now. So what that's going to look like right now, I don't know. But we have had some days that it is definitely very, very hazy out and not very sunshiny. They may prolong the thermal inversions, which increases drift potential. So on those days that you're spraying that it's very overcast and hazy out, just really watch your temperatures. And you can see those on some of the spray sites like that. The spray cast site for most of southern Manitoba is covered under the spray cast site. You can kind of see that, and just watch your weather stations and watch your temperatures and type things. But generally, it would affect your warm season crops and your warm season weeds the most if we do end up with prolonged hazy conditions that are affecting temperatures. Sometimes what it can do too, the hazy temperatures can protect us from those really, really hot sunny days that are really hard on the crop when we hit those plus 30 temperatures and it's really dry out, and the hazy days actually do protect us a bit from that. So again, we'll just have to see how this shakes out and how long these weather conditions are going to last. But we do know there's a lot of forest fires to the north and to the west of us, and that's depending how the winds are and depending what that's going to. We're just going to have to see what that looks like for the remainder of the season. That can directly affect products like Liberty. Those do best in hotter weather and bright sunshine, and so that is something that your Liberty may struggle a little bit under those conditions. So if you have to spray on one of those days and it doesn't look like there's any end in sight to those days, then make sure you do everything else you can to make that Liberty work the best you can. So lots of water, appropriate droplet size, appropriate nozzles to get droplet size, that type of thing, and just get really, really good coverage and help that product as much as you can, because it's one of the ones that would be maybe directly affected. And we do have other groups of herbicides that are light activated, though they need to be activated by light. But even under hazy conditions, we would still have enough. The products should still be working as well as they can. It would really be Liberty. Something like Reglone later on in the summer. Reglone actually, when we're doing desiccation, Reglone actually works better under not bright sunshine conditions. So if we are still hazy later on in the summer, those are actually better conditions for something like Reglone, but that's really about the only one that works that way. So I think that was all I had. Lionel, if we had questions, we can take them now or we can take them later, just whatever you like.
Yeah, no, there's some questions that have come in, so let's deal with them now. So lots of broadleaf weeds are just emerging and are in the seeding stage of development, while cereals are the 3 to 5 leaf to 2 tillers. Is there a concern that under maximum water volumes and synthetic products that these droplets simply run off the broadleaf seedlings?
Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing. When you go to larger droplets, there is that issue that larger droplets can run off. But your broadleaf weeds, most of them have quite a very horizontal leaf compared to a grass. I'd be more concerned with large droplets rolling off and rolling down grass weeds. Again, I think what you need to do is follow the label, use the maximum water volume, and use the appropriate droplet size. And I guess there is always that concern with too coarse of a droplet droplet, you can miss some of the small plants when they're very small. And I have seen this in fields. There's an awful lot of broadleaf weeds just breaking surface and just coming up, or you've got, volunteer canola that's in cotyledon stage. Am I going to spray that today? I'd like to wait probably a couple days if I could and get just a little bit more growth on that, and always do that scrape back to see what else is coming. If sometimes when it doesn't look like there's a lot of weeds there today, they're right below the surface. They've germinated and they're going to break through really quick. So wait as long as you can. But you do need to be within that crop staging for maximum efficacy. And again, on some products, you do have to switch out products. Something like, Vero is one like that you have to watch. When you feel that node on the stem, you need to switch to a different graminicide, and because you can't be spraying the wheat that late. So you do need to watch that. But normally too, you'll get your best crop safety with lots of water as well. It's so that helps. So just lots of water, as much water as you can with those weeds, and try, and again, appropriate droplet size is best.
Okay. Kim, did you mean extend flex beans when talking about spraying Liberty on beans?
Well, the enlist beans are and extend flex now are glufosinate tolerant. So now we know that we have to have the Liberty 200 SN formulation for that one. And but yeah, so the extend flex is tolerant to Liberty as well. And the enlist system is tolerant to Liberty. So those are probably going to be a significant amount of acres here in Manitoba as well. Just because a product is or just because the beans are tolerant to that product, you don't have to use that product. Some of our farmers may not be using that product. You can still use all the traditional products as well. But yeah, there are newer systems of newer soybean production systems now that do have tolerance to glufosinate built into them, so you can be using that product if you want to.
Okay. And this question we get quite a bit. Any concerns with chemical effectiveness and water quality? Example, really hard water.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've done talks like that before, and I maybe should have brought some of that in. We could do a quick talk again too about water quality, but yeah, hard water is an issue. I know it depends on the area of the province. Some guys are able to get all their water from municipal wells, or they're on, like, what I call town water kind of thing. And that's good water. Usually it's very good. You have to watch hard water that has cations, like lots of calcium and magnesium are mostly the main cations, but it's also things like potassium and sodium and things like that. If you have any concerns about your water source, please get it tested. You can do a very quick test done through, I like the AgVise test. You can work with companies like Winfield. They have really good products to use to mitigate hard water. Lots of times it's just using an appropriate amount of AMS, or an AMS, a product with AMS and maybe some other things in it. But ammonium sulfate, that's basically spray grade ammonium sulfate, not just regular AMS out of the fertilizer tank. But there are ways to mitigate hard water. If you do have hard water and you can use a product like a Crimson or an AMS, which is from Winfield, or an AMS, a spray grade AMS, lots of times that does help the products. And then there's also, so if you have hard water, and then there's also, if you have dirty water, like physically dirt suspended in water, or, murky water type thing, you need to be able to see the bottom of a 5-gallon pail. And you want that water to be clean. And that affects your glyphosate and affects your glufosinate as well. And so it also affects your sprayer. It can, eventually plug tips and things like that if you've got dirty water going through a sprayer. So you don't want that. But yeah, hard water is always an issue. So if you have any issues, get a water test done, and then the water test will usually recommend what you need to put in there to mitigate those. In a lot of cases, you can mitigate the risks and make that water much better for spraying just by adding a product, an ammonium sulfate type product to that water. But you have to know what you have. You wouldn't know just by looking at it. You have to have a water test, and then after that, it's just a mathematical calculation of which cations are there, like the calcium, magnesium, potassium, etc., and how much ammonium sulfate you need to add to tie those up. Basically, it ties up those cations so that they don't affect how the products are working.
Okay, what about water temperature? Does that have any effect? Some guys will say that they'll fill their tanks kind of and let it sit for a while so it warms up, or
Yeah, yeah, and lots of us, yeah, lots of times, like really, really cold water. I mean, that's just what we have. We're spraying, fairly early in the year, although we are at June already. But a lot of times, if you're pulling up some water and it's really, really cold, there's not a lot you can do about that. I know when you're talking about ammonium sulfate, we really recommend using liquid ammonium sulfate. You can use dry ammonium sulfate, but it does not mix well in cold water, and so that would be an issue, I think, with cold water there. But most of the products, or all of the products we have that we spray with, like they'd be fine to spray. It's just make sure that you've got the agitation going, and make sure that you're mixing well, and make sure that you're giving appropriate time from product to product to get it to mix well. But generally, things don't mix in quite as nice or as fast, I guess, with colder water. So make sure when you are mixing multiple products in the tank that there's just a bit of time separation from product to product to make sure that we don't get any interference there. But ammonium sulfate for sure, dry ammonium sulfate does not like to dissolve in cold water. So if you were trying to mitigate some of the risks of having hard water, that is where I would really want to see you in a liquid ammonium sulfate, liquid spray grade ammonium sulfate instead of the dry.
Okay. Is there something you could recommend to apply on the pea crop to control dandelions?
Yeah, you're pretty, well, I guess we could look at our guide to crop protection. So in our guide to crop protection, if you have that, there's tables at the front that have all of the crops. So if you're looking at the pea table, and what we've got is we've got it separated into the pre-emerge products, which it's too late now, or those would have been on before the crop was either seeded or up, and then the post-emergent herbicides. So when you look at your post-emergent herbicides, um, there's not a lot in there that would do a really, really good job on dandelions. And that is something where I think you need to look more long term. If you're putting peas on a field, or where you're going to be putting your peas, you need to know that field history. And if you have a perennial weed on there, then a pre-harvest roundup, or definitely some fall weed control to take care of those perennials is a must, because you're not going to get those perennials very well in this year anyways, no matter what crop you grow and no matter what product you put on. But then something like peas, if you look at those tables, if you have your new guide, it's on page 79 in the new guide. There really isn't anything in the post-emergent herbicides that's going to do a decent job. So, you'll probably knock them back a bit with your Viper or your Odyssey or whatever you're going to be putting on there. But there just isn't a lot out there. So that's more of a long-term planning, especially with perennial weeds and crops that you have more limited options in. If you'd have gone to, some of the pre-emerge products, I think you'd have a bit of a better chance maybe getting some of those out. And again, if you've done a glyphosate, if you do a pre-emerge with a glyphosate burn-off, that will get some of those, but it's really hard to get rid of a perennial weed in the spring. That should have been taken care of last fall, and you do your best right now, but you're really not going to do a good job of getting rid of them in any crop because they're perennials.
Can you do more than one application of Viper or Odyssey?
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay.
but that would be something that you'd probably have to ask your rep about. As far as I'm aware, it's just one application per year. And you have to watch your staging on peas. They can get to the 6-leaf stage very quickly. They don't have to be very big. We've got some, our peas at the U of M farm in our crop diagnostic school. We sprayed them 2 days ago, or yesterday. 2 days ago. I can't remember. Anyways, we did them because we were worried about getting beyond the staging. The weeds were getting big enough, and that one's always a bit of a race too. You have to watch if you're waiting for weeds to come up. Really be careful on that on pea staging, because they'll hit 6 leaves very quickly, and they can be still pretty short, and you don't really see it. You've got to get out there and stage them properly.
Okay. Great presentation, Kim. How critical is timing?
Oh, absolutely. It's critical. Like, you mean timing for weed, like for weed staging, or for weed staging, I think it's absolutely crucial. You have to spray weeds when they're small. Now again, it's a bit of a balance. You have to make sure there's enough of them up with something, especially like if you're only going to spray, you only get to spray once. You get one shot at it. But it's always better to take them out a bit earlier. When you're talking about critical periods of weed, critical weed-free periods for every single crop, that's early in the crop's lifespan. It's early. So you have to get those weeds out early to give that crop every chance it can be to be the most competitive it can be and get that crop going. So if you're going to pull the trigger, pull it on the early side. As long as you're not, if you do that scrape back on the soil and you see that, okay, I don't see a lot more coming, this is maybe everything that's up, then, and even though they're small, I would still pull the trigger and do that. If you're waiting for more weeds to come up, some of those weeds that are already up are getting very big, and that can happen really quickly. So timing is so crucial. And every label has, on every label, they will have the staging. If you look at the product pages and the labels, there's the staging of the weeds. Certain products will do bigger weeds, like, instead of a 6-leaf weed, it might do an 8-leaf weed, but we're still always better to spray that weed when it has less leaves. You don't want to be going right to the maximum leaf staging, because you're pushing it. And by then you've already affected, they've been competing with the crop for that much longer. So try to get those weeds out of there as soon as they're all up. I try to get them out of there as soon as you can.
Okay, and one more. Has there been any research on liquid AMS and granular AMS? Does one work better than the other?
As far as I know, no. As far as I know, in the States, they use an awful lot of dry AMS, but they are spraying sometimes later in the season than us. They tend to have maybe warmer water than we're using. And in the States, they use an awful lot of dry AMS. But in Western Canada, when we're using AMS, just because of the really cold water we're using, and if we're spraying a little earlier in the year, we tend to use liquid. As far as I know, there's no difference. At the end of the day, the ammonium sulfate is the purpose of it is to tie up those cations so that they don't interfere with the herbicide efficacy. So that ammonium sulfate is gonna tie up the calcium, is gonna tie up the magnesium, is gonna tie up the sodium, the potassium, all of those. And so that's what its purpose. So really, at the end of the day, ammonium sulfate is ammonium sulfate, but you need to use the one that's going to mix the best, and whatever ease of use it is. If you're going to put in the dry, you're going to have an appropriate way to weigh it out, because you're going to go by weight on it. Whereas I know I just have found using the jugs is just a better way to go. Like using the liquid is just a better way to go. And there are some, straight spray grade, just straight AMS, and there are some other products as well, like a Crimson from Winfield, which is a nice product, and it has a few other things in it that kind of help the spray out. So those are things to talk to your rep about.
Okay, and while I'm changing screens, why did dicamba is not being able to be used in the States this year?
It's a regulatory issue. There was something on the label that was legally not correct. It was not an efficacy thing at all. It's just a legal issue with the label. And so the label, I guess, was challenged, and it went to, they now have to rewrite the label. And it was not possible to get that done in time for this season. This has been going on for over a year now. So last year, they were allowed to use the dicamba that was in the pipeline, but it also had to be used before a certain date, which was, I think, quite early in June. I don't remember the exact date, but it was quite early in June. But they were still able to use the dicamba. But even by last year, they knew that there was going to be no dicamba allowed to be used in crop this year for 2025. And it's because the label is being rewritten. It's a technical issue with the label. It's not with the product itself, although we do know there has been lots of issues with dicamba in the States with spray drift and lots of stewardship issues of that product in the States, whereas we haven't seen those in Western Canada really at all. And so that is probably what precipitated people challenging the label and trying to get it stopped. There has been an awful lot of issues with dicamba. It's a great product and does a great job on weeds, but there are some risks using it. And if used properly, those risks are really low. But there was situations when it was first being used that it wasn't being used properly. And because of that, I think there were some challenges. And then it was discovered that there was an issue with the label. And so it's really just a technical issue with the label. It's nothing to do with the dicamba itself. Regardless, they can't use it. So you could grow an extend bean if you wanted to, but you can't spray dicamba on it. So realistically, most of the acres, like I said, by last year, 65% of the acres were in list. They'll probably have Extend Flex, so they'll be able to use it. There's an Extend, they just can't use the dicamba. They could use the glufosinate. But most of the acres, most of the soybean acres in the States are going to be getting a glufosinate spray on them.
Okay, well, great presentation, Kim. Covered a lot of stuff there in a short period of time, and I think a lot of good information for guys that are, even if they are spraying already, it's a lot of reminders, and for guys that are getting ready to go, definitely reminders of what they should be watching out for. So thanks, Kim, and you're going to hang on through the crop scouting panel.
Yeah, I'm here to the end. Thanks, Lionel.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim. Okay, so we're going to go through a little bit of a crop update here, see how things have gone over the past week. And I guess progress has been fairly good over the past week. We've got a lot of acres planted. I think probably the biggest things that we've been facing are some of the extreme temperatures. We had some really hot days. We've been getting wind again, which has definitely been making it difficult to get some spraying done. But getting the crop in the ground has been pretty good, as most producers have. If they're not complete, they're pretty close to complete, and we jumped to 95% complete over since last week. So where does that take us? Well, that's in 2024, we were 83%. Our 5-year average is 85%. So we're about 10% ahead of our 5-year average. So crop got in good timing this year, and which is good. Hopefully, it'll be able to take advantage of the soil moisture we had, as we tend to be getting a little bit on the dry side right now throughout the whole province, and can be looking for a rain here. So hopefully we can take advantage of some of that spring and winter moisture. Winter wheat and fall rye growth is good. Winter wheat is some winter wheat's in the flag leaf stage already. Fall rye, the head is in the boot and starting to emerge in some cases. So we're which tends to seem always early, but then when you get looking back on other years, we're pretty much right on par. So we'll be watching for those crops to be heading out in the next week to 10 days. Peas, we're complete. The crops in the ground, and most of the fields are in the 2 to 5 node stage, and some are probably getting closer to the 6 node stage. Some spraying has started in some areas, and some areas is complete. But I think, as Kim mentioned, most of the fields are going to be in that position where they're going to need to be sprayed over the next week here. Soybeans, 90% complete, and across the province, with a lot of the early seeded soybeans up already. And I think over the next week here, we'll start seeing the majority of them popping through the ground. So definitely a crop that's advancing well, fast as well. So need to be keeping an eye on it for early weed control. Kim mentioned about the staging of peas, and I took this picture yesterday, and that pea, if you would have walked up to it, would have been about 4 inches off the ground. And when you stretched it out and try to count what staging it would be in, I would be talking anywhere from that 5 to 6 node stage range. So again, definitely in a situation where we're going to be needing to be on top of spraying peas over the next week here, as they're going to be growing fast with the good growing conditions, and especially in areas where we have some moisture. Spring wheat seeding is complete in most areas, with the early seeded wheat fields in the 4 to 5 leaf stage and starting to tiller. The picture I took on the right hand side, you could see the plant was probably in that 5, maybe coming on to 6 leaf with a couple of tillers on it already. So one of the fields that was put in fairly early. Oats and barley are sitting in at 97% seeded across the province, and the early seeded fields are in that 3 to 4 leaf stage. Our grain and silage corn in most areas is complete, and in most areas is coming up already. So we're definitely going to be seeing need to be keeping an eye on corn for our first application for weed control. Remember, corn is not very competitive when it's young, so you want to take advantage of another point Kim made today, them keeping them clean when they're young, when the crop is small, because it's not very competitive. Canola, 90% complete, and I think that was probably the majority of the seeding that happened last week across the province. And in a lot of areas, the crop has emerged. We're varying stages, anywhere from cotyledon stage to 2 to 5 leaf stage in places. You can see the plants don't need to be very big. Picture I took on the top right-hand corner has got a not a very big plant, but it's in the 2, and the third leaf is starting to come already. So it's looking pretty good right now for most of the crop. Early seeded stuff, I'm not seeing a lot of flea beetle damage. However, some of the later seeded stuff is maybe struggling a bit. It's coming through the ground. It's some of it's sitting in dry dirt, so we're getting spotty emergence in places. And then we're starting to see some maybe more damage on some of those fields with some flea beetle feeding. So need to be keeping an eye on some of those later seeded fields as they emerge and get going. So that's about it for the crop update. Like I said, we had a good week of seeding, and a lot of the crop is coming up. So we've got some good conditions for crop growth right now. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention is the pest report that John Gavlosky and Kim Brown do on a crop pest update, and it's on a weekly basis. And last week we talked about the pea leaf weevil, and John, I'm not sure if you're on or not. He might not be on today, but anyways.
John is on. I don't know, John,
Okay.
are you on mute?
I was on mute. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. John, I just want to comment on this report. It brought a lot of calls to. I got a lot of calls this week as producers were out checking their fields. What we talked about last week, and then what your report. Definitely, a lot of producers are seeing the pea leaf weevil, and one of the ones that I guess the biggest question I was getting is how much damage, or how do you rate the damage? And this is one of the pictures that was sent to me, and he said, what would you consider that as how much damage?
Yeah. So first of all, the what you're seeing there, as much as it might look scary, seeing quite a few notches, is that level of defoliation is not going to be economical. That's certainly less than a quarter of the leaf material gone, so maybe somewhere in that 15 to 20% range. One of the things that maybe is fortunate regarding pea leaf weevil is they like to restrict their feeding to the edges. They will do those semicircular notches. I contacted an entomologist who's done a lot of research on pea leaf weevil and was asking them, so how many notches would you need for adult feeding to be economical? Because the information that we've always been given is that the adult feeding really isn't economical. It's the larva feeding on the nodules that's economical. And the entomologist told me you'd pretty much need a couple hundred notches per plant on average for the adult feeding to be economical. So unless it's at a point where the plants are literally wilting away because of the notching, which would take an exceptional amount, the adult feeding really isn't having a major impact on the plant. And that photo there, the plant will outgrow that quite easily. But once again, it's the larva feeding on the nodules. Then the plants can't fix nitrogen properly. That's the real issue with pea leaf weevil. We are seeing a lot more pea leaf weevil now than we have been in the past. Until this year, some of the higher levels were restricted more into the northwest. Now we're seeing it a bit more into the southwest and even into the central region. Our survey that is currently going on, there are some fields in the central region, even in that Tree Herm Notre Dame area, that we're able to get counts over 50 notches per plant. Not on average, but some of the individual counts are over 50 per plant. So levels are getting up. But once again, those 50 per plant on those plants really aren't going to be economical to the plant from that feeding. But we'll just have to keep an eye on things because again, it's the larva feeding that is yet to occur that will be the issue, and it just might be a heads up for people. If you're in an area that we're starting to see a lot of this consistently, seed treatments are one option to deal with it.
Good. Yeah, no, it was interesting to that the calls that came in last week as producers were getting out there, probably checking their fields for spraying time, and we're starting to see these notches, so we're getting more calls regarding it. So it's interesting to see how many. I guess it was maybe here, but it just we weren't really looking for it as much, and
Well, yes, and one maybe word of encouragement if people are noticing this. If you've got peas that are in that 2nd to 6th node stage, if you can grab a count for us, we'll include that data in our survey. Now's the time to get those counts done. And the more data we get, the more we can put together a map that'll reflect what's happening in the province.
okay, great. Thanks, John, and thanks for doing that weekly report. Kim, this was the other thing I took off that weekly report that I thought was pretty interesting. You did a little bit of an update on water hemp, and I thought these pictures were kind of interesting and good to show. So I don't know if you want to make a few comments regarding the water hemp.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it's really hard to tell the different pigweeds apart at this stage. From looking top down like this, they're really hard to tell apart. But one thing, red root pigweed is the only pigweed that will be really, really hairy. And even at this stage with some true leaves on it, you're going to see hairs on the stems of those leaves, or the petioles, we call that. And so those are a little hard to see. You might need a magnifying glass or something in there, or, you have to really look up close, but you should still be able to see some type of hairs on those leaf petioles right now. And sometimes the cotyledon shape on water hemp is a little different. It can be a bit shorter and fatter, and it can be kind of pointy tipped compared to regular red root pigweed, which the cotyledons are kind of long and cigar shaped. They're long and oblong, and they're very different. Now, would be easier if you can see them side by side, but even in this picture, on the third picture here with these here, you can see some of those cotyledons on those tiny little plants. They are just a bit of a different shape. They're not that long, skinny shape. And then if you pull them up and look, they are absolutely smooth and hairless. So you can tell, but you have to look really, really carefully right now. And I've got some really great picture, actually, thanks to Dennis Lang. He was out scouting some fields by St. Malo and has a bunch more pictures. And I'll probably do the same thing again in this week's crop pest report, just because this is the time to be scouting and knowing you can tell now that you have water hemp if you're looking for the right things and if you're really looking at it carefully. But standing, up and looking down at your boots when it's this small, you don't know which pigweed that is. That's a pigweed, but you don't know which one it is. You're going to have to look really carefully at it. So that's just what we have to do going forward. We have to do that.
Okay, thanks, Kim. And again, for the insect and disease report, if the link I put up there, if you're interested, there's also, if you're interested, if you go to that site, you can get an email with it emailed to you as well. And again, thanks for Kim and John for getting that done. Okay. Next one is to Marla and Ann, and got some producers looking at top dressing some of their crops, and it's always a good time to talk about when is the best time for getting some extra fertilizer on if you, I guess, A, made a mistake when you were seeding, or B, you wanted to do a split application. So Marla and Ann, if you guys want to take over on that one.
Sure. I think you maybe did you get a slide there, Lionel, with
Oh,
some
yes, I did.
timing staging?
Yeah, you bet.
So Anne can speak to this in terms of just the staging itself, but received a couple of calls of people asking about timing. And Amy Magen or Amy Delacqui and Don Flayton did a report it was written up in 2018, and you can find that report on the Manitoba Crop Alliance page. But they were looking at nitrogen management for high yielding wheat varieties. And what they were finding in that is that generally speaking, if you were applying a top dressing at stem elongation, then you had just as much, if not slightly more yield boost than comparing to putting all of it down at the time of planting. And so they had some very intensely managed by the U of M, what they called their gold standard sites compared to the other sites that were maybe less intensely managed. And at those gold level sites, they actually had an even bigger boost in terms of seeing it was a small but significant increase in yield putting down at stem elongation. So something to keep in mind. They also looked at flag leaf emergence timing. But the bigger kind of boost was really getting that nitrogen down now around stem elongation. So Anne, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the timing or staging for that.
Sure. So stem elongation is the next stage after tillering. So um, once we think, that tillering is fairly far progressed, then it's a good idea to keep an eye on your wheat or your whatever cereal crop you're looking at to see when stem elongation is happening. So it can happen fairly quick if we have some hot and good conditions for growth. But basically, stem elongation starts when that first node pushes up from the ground. So the picture here on the right-hand side is from the Grain Farmers of Ontario, and it's just a good image to show like where all those nodes and the spike is located in the wheat. So it's kind of like those nodes are pushing the spike up the stem, and as those nodes get pushed up, then the stem elongates. So stem elongation would be the whole time from when the first node comes up out of the ground and the stem starts to elongate until the end of stem elongation, which is, when the maximum number of nodes have pushed up. So the picture on the left-hand side is just showing like a photo I'd use for PGR timing. So for plant growth regulators, it's also really critical that we look to see when stem elongation is starting to happen, because we want to hit that plant early on as well, like in that growth stage 31, 32, but not past that.
Okay.
And I just wanted to can I make one more comment on, I know this isn't a PGR question, but I did hear from a couple of people this week about trying to delay herbicide application until and a bit later so that they can do herbicide application and PGR timing together. And I would say that's typically, like, unless you're going to do a really late herbicide application, it's typically not proper for timing. Like you wouldn't want to be applying your PGR before the stem starts to elongate. It would be less effective then.
Yeah, and remember what Kim was saying about maximizing yields is to get the weeds out early, and that to me would be a little on the late side, I would think.
Yeah, so I think if you're trying to do that, you'd be a bit on the late side for herbicide application and a bit on the early side for PGR application.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Lionel, I get those questions too. It's Kim and I get those same questions as Ann, and it's the same message. It's too early. It's too early for PGR and too late for herbicides. You shouldn't be putting them on at the same time. They need to be two separate applications.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Okay. Crop Diagnostic School. Marla, you're still on, so I'm going to let you give your spiel on this one again.
Sure, sounds good. So the event is filling up. We've been getting lots of emails in about registration. So we are holding our Crop Diagnostic School again in July. We have 4 available dates for agronomists and such to register. So that is going to be July 3rd, and then the following week, the 8th, 9th, and 10th. Starts at 8:30 in the morning. We will likely have some extra soils training first thing in the morning around 8 o'clock that people can attend if they're looking for soil and water continuing education credits as CCAs. And if you are looking to register, you can send us an email at mbcropschool@gmail.com with information, including your name, the date that you are looking to register for, how many people or the names of the people you're registering, if you're registering for more than just yourself, and then any dietary restrictions. And then we will send you a response back with an invoice for payment. If anybody is looking to attend as a farmer, we have Farmer Day that is on Friday, July 4th. And so that Farmer Day is complimentary for people who are members of one of the different commodity associations. If you're not a member, you can still attend on Farmer Day for $75. We'll invoice you at that point for payment. But same thing, you can go to the mbcropschool@gmail.com email address in order to register. And then when you're sending a Farmer Day registration request in, just kind of put Farmer Day in your subject line, and then let us know what your farm name is and whether you're a member of the different commodity associations. And we will then follow up that way with getting your registration in. So let us know if you want to come. We're looking forward to seeing people at school again this year.
Okay, thanks, Marla. Okay, just a few more slides here to finish up for the day, but crop production extension specialists, there's our names and contact information. So if you've got questions, if you want to be part of the surveys, whether it's the insect surveys, disease surveys, give us a call. We're looking for fields. Our livestock specialists, if you got questions about pastures. Now's the time when a lot of cattle are going to pastures, and so a lot of good information from these people regarding rotations, nutrition on pasture, all that kind of stuff. So definitely keep them in mind. Seeding deadlines are coming up, and that's what that slide was for. But here's the contact information from MASC service centers. There's the locations, the numbers. There's the field crop protection guys that are available there. And I'm going to go back to this slide because seeding deadlines are today for some of the areas for soybeans. So if you want full coverage under those and you're in these areas, you need to, today's your last day, or if you need more information, contact the your crop insurance office or your MASC office in your area. And Aaron, if there's no questions.
Questions.
No questions? Okay, we're good. I'd like to thank everybody for attending and join us next week, June 11th, for our next edition of Crop Talk.